see if we can get this connecting again. Okay. Well, seems like it's working. Let's try this again, shall we? I know. So dumb. Sorry about that. Yeah, I'm just not on top of my game with the streaming stuff lately. I can't quite put my finger on what's going wrong. I reset my stream key, so hopefully that helps. I don't want to be wasting my time with this if it's just going to drag the stream down. So I might end up, I don't know, I may end up not doing the live paper trading stuff right now if I can't get my stream health to stay good. That's kind of how I feel. It's not worth it. Could be your browser. Yeah, I mean, maybe. I typically use Google because Google is YouTube. I mean, YouTube's owned by Google. I don't run anything else, but lately it's been not good. Like, I don't know what's going on. It's just too much, maybe too many things on the screen. I don't know. I feel like it's TradingView. I mean, it's like the stream is fine, and then like 2 minutes later, it's not fine. So I don't know. It's ticking me off a bit. I'm not gonna lie. I don't want to deal with it either. And I wouldn't say it's embarrassing, but it's silly. You know, it shouldn't be this difficult to keep the connection good. I've done this before where I've dropped down the amount of data that I'm trying to sort of move. It's bizarre because like OBS is the software I use, and it does not indicate that there's any problem like at all. Like I've had a really strong connection all day. Usually in the past, if it says a poor connection through YouTube, it is like also a poor connection on OBS, but that's not been the case. So I'm really kind of confused by that. Looks like we're getting that second buy up on SPY. Yeah, I don't know. Could try lowering the bit rate. I don't want to do that too much, but maybe if I lower it a little bit, it helps. Let's try it. Let's see if that helps. It may decrease the quality of the video a bit, but I almost kind of want that. I think Google's just trash. If I can't stream, I can't stream. I don't know what else to do. Oh, you did? Yeah, MPW is having a bit of a pullback, so I'm not. I know you've probably heard me earlier, but I'm not really convinced that this can't come down again. So what I did is I got the leaps, which are pretty far out, and then I got like a year or something, or 6 months to a year out. I got a short-term put because I wanted to make sure if it did drop because of earnings, at least I could get out of my leap and make some money with the put. I don't know for a fact that that's going to work out. That's just kind of my plan in case all else fails. For some reason it tanks. Yeah, I'll tell you what, let's just get out of this for now. Let's just reduce the overhead here. Yeah, I mean, long term, I still think it's a ridiculously good trade. It's just my opinion about it. It's not quite to the breakout yet, so it's a little early. This is one that, I don't know, if fundamentally somebody says something is, they study these things and they say it's like pretty undervalued, and you're seeing that kind of across the board, there's a general agreement that this is undervalued, then I kind of feel like that's probably the case. Yeah. Yeah, they've got dividend as well. It's hard for me to look at this and historically see how low it is and not imagine it even coming back up to retrade the previous region. I don't know. It just seems almost, I hate the word inevitable, but it just feels like this sort of super wedgy. I'll answer you your question in a second. It feels like this very simple setup to me, I guess. I like that. What is it that makes you cover AMC? Is it pulls viewers, or do you think some special for some reason? Well, so I started streaming in like November, or not even streaming. I just started doing some videos in November of 2021. And then I really started covering AMC a lot more during this March time period. And that's the reason I was doing that, is because I was a big part of that was because I was part of that movement to the upside on the squeeze. And then I got interested in studying the sequencing for AMC. Some might just say fractals, some might say cycles or whatever. I found it to be really interesting to me. And as an investor in AMC, I wanted to continue to cover it. Now, do I think that there are better investments, overall investments, than AMC? Yeah. I mean, I don't feel like there's a strong argument that AMC is like the best investment you could possibly make. I think for potential squeeze returns, for a potential massive move, this one has a lot of potential, just like a lot of the other quote-unquote meme stocks that existed. But there's always going to be winners and losers. Some of those stocks were losers. Like, they went by the wayside, they went bankrupt, whatever. Not all of them have survived. I think AMC is one that has survived. I'm fairly confident it will survive. And I don't like I got to be honest, I mean, I've talked about it pretty openly. I don't really like their current financials. So do I think that the run is warranted based on financials? No. But I think that long term, the financials look like they could be good. Because if it makes that kind of recovery, you're getting in at historically very, very low prices again, just like we were back here. And if long term the stock is only worth $20 a share or $10 a share or $12 a share. I mean, Cinemark has been trading at like 12s and 14s and stuff. And again, I'm not saying AMC is in the same boat financially. They're not. But if that ends up being about the value of the company over time, this is a really good price. So maybe it's a bit of an obsession. Maybe it's just me not wanting to let go of it. But yeah, that's why I cover AMC. I don't know what you mean by pulls viewers, though, because I don't get a lot of viewers anyways. But I will say that, yeah, like if I make a video on AMC, if you're asking me that question, like if I make a video on AMC, will it get more views than if I make a video on some other obscure stock that maybe people haven't heard of? The answer is yeah. I mean, it just will. Is the squeeze thesis still there? Yeah, the setup for AMC is still there. Like, it's not what it was. And I will say that if I'm talking about just the same thesis that people had back in 2020, is that the same thing that's going on now? No, times change. But we were going into an election year back then. There was a downtrend for years, 4 years, prior to that squeeze moment. And you had RSI coming down to historic lows. That's your selling and your buying, right? Indicator, and it's just one of the indicators. And now you've got really high volume increase after this reverse split decision. You're at historic lows. The old adage is buy low, sell high. So I understand like why people like Jim Cramer and whoever might look at AMC and say sell it because we don't like stocks to go down. He's not wrong. If you're just looking for the trade and the directional trade, then absolutely AMC's been nothing but a crapshoot over the last 2 years. You can't argue that it's been great. If you happen to trade some of these bigger moves, these were 160, 180% moves. So, I mean, trading to the upside has been very profitable on AMC, but you can't hold it forever if that's what you wanted to do. And really, this original move is the only move that's probably made a lot of millionaires out of people who are following AMC. And only if you sold in this upper region before the distribution happened. That's gone. That's already in the past. So we're looking at the present. Is the thesis still there for a short squeeze? AMC's never had really low short interest. It's always been fairly elevated. It's not always on like what we would call like a short squeeze list. I talk a little bit about Stockfather. He has a list for short squeezes that he uses like Fintel and does a lot of criterion for. There's other places that have like short squeeze indicators and they're like, oh, you can look at this or that and it might indicate where you will get a short squeeze. There's a lot of factors that go into it. And I don't think that AMC necessarily fits the bill for everything all the time. It just doesn't. Our days to cover will go way up and then they'll drop back down. I think Ortex, that kind of data, made a living off of AMC people and GME people. I don't think that data is always the best because it's late. It's like 2 weeks late before it updates. Sometimes it's really right on, sometimes it's not. So for folks that are just looking for a squeeze, I don't know if I could tell you that this is definitely going to squeeze here or there. But if you're looking for a big potential move, this is a big move. And I think the setup is here. You need confirmation, and that's something that I always talk about. But this is a 250% move. So in and of itself, does it have to be a squeeze play? No, not necessarily. But does it have the potential to make some pretty major gains now, yeah, it does. And that's from a technical standpoint. My feelings about AMC have changed over time, but I still think that in the end it has some pretty humongous swings that you can, if you can catch them, you're going to make good money. So I have someone in our Discord group who's asking about LCID. So I'll tell you what, let's see what is also on here. It might be another AMC chart. I'm not sure. No, this is GME. I'll do a little analysis on LCID. It's Lucid. I have no investment in this stock, but I'm going to check it out anyways. Kind of looks like all the others. Let's see. Yeah, so this is the another January one. I'm gonna mark off my dates because now I'm starting to see that pattern everywhere. I want to see if I can see it here. Is it June 24th? I thought it was January. I'm marking off November 9th, the election cycle, because I've been noticing that there's a strong connection, and I'm just going to mark the vertically mark the dates. But there seems to be a really strong connection with this entire group of meme stocks. And I don't know if Lucid is a meme stock. That's not what I'm saying, but I hear it. I hear it a lot in this group. So it's sort of like what I'm seeing with some others. You've got a decent RSI divergence, but it's just kind of like boiling up. It hasn't really made any serious decision yet about direction because it's sitting there under the gun, if you will. It's underneath the downtrend. So this locally is divergent here. And then divergence is just a thing. And you can see that it doesn't always play out. This was also divergent here too on these two bottoms. And it did have a reactive move up. And then that was it. There's nothing else to that. It ended up breaking back down. So it's always like grain of salt. But the longer the divergence and on a more higher prominent time frame, I think the more you should probably pay attention. Why am I so obsessed with that? I'm not really. I'm just looking at RSI as the more basic volume indicator. Like RSI versus volume versus price is such an easy, simple way to understand what might be going on with buying and selling. So there's a lot of other indicators out there. You know, there's what's it called? MFI. Sorry for tisking. There's MFI. That's a money flow index indicator that helps you with seeing where smart money is buying. There's accumulation distribution indicators, which tells you, where supposedly tells you where smart money is buying and selling. I mean, there's so many different ones. You can use a number of them. Yeah, maybe I'll just need to. I might crush some of these things. Getting kind of irritated with this stream. I'll make it my goal to try to fix it by next week because I'm getting tired of the stream being trash. It's only been like a day and a half. I'm already tired of it. All right, so we're looking at Lucid right now, just checking it out. Yeah, so this is like your original. I call it a cat ear because it's the distribution cycle that happened last, and it really is a UTAD, upthrust after distribution, because there was a distribution and then it had another upthrust and then a secondary one even, and this is very commonly where you find that cat ear on the second one. I think it's already out, but the problem is it's not really doing anything right now that indicates it's ready to go, except for maybe this. I think this push here, and I'm looking also at the local trend. I'm going to ignore the outermost one for the time being. I'm just look at this one right here. So on the daily, Lucid is really far away from its moving average as well. It's challenging. I'm not seeing that big drop off that we got on AMC. Let me go back to this one. This is an easy one for me to see it. It was roughly August 30th, 2023. There's a reason I'm doing this, though it may not seem very purposeful. I know there's a big kind of wedging action going on as well. That's important. So there it is. Yeah, this is actually a lot like, I think this is a lot like the charge point chart, because I think there's an original trend here that seems to have been messed with at the same time. See that? So it's a bizarre kind of connection that I'm finding. It's just a lot of these stocks that were created in yeah, maybe that's because they immediately go into like a selling cycle until they sort of show that they're worth it. All right, so this isn't really helpful. I'm gonna get rid of this one. We've already crossed over that. I would say there's a decent wedging action going on. CGC, yeah, I'll check it out. I'll see that one. I'll take a look. Okay. I can't say very much about long term whether this is going to be even remotely profitable. I don't know. I think short term, I'm seeing this as a cycle, and it looks like M and then a smaller one. And I know it's a little weird, but I've seen this kind of repetition pattern before. It's just like a diamond here. And usually the diamond, and I see it here, but it's like falling. Usually it has that initial drop, and I'm not really seeing a huge one. I would say it's probably here to here. So it's a lot like AMC because I think it's built out a fairly decent chance of a run, but I don't see as big of a target because the target should be about here to about, man, maybe there. I know it's weird, but you can do a diamond target and just use the exact same methodology that you use for a diamond bottom, but you can use it with an offset and it still works. So what I'm doing is I'm going from like, this is a liquid center of a widening. The tricky part to me is always like that initial move in. And I usually try to go back to the hook value. I don't go all the way to the top. It's not that the top's not important. It's just that the hook value is typically what you see on the breakout. And it might be enough here to get you over the wedge. Oh, yeah. Well, it's all right. He was a really good guy. Temporary problems, permanent solution, you know. And I don't wish it for anybody, but I do appreciate the condolences. So it hit me really hard, and that's pretty much why I lost my job. Like, that's all there is to it. I got on the wrong side of somebody too, so that didn't help. They were saying that like I had like a consistent attitude problem, and it really wasn't a consistent attitude problem. It was just that they didn't like me. And so anytime there was, you know, like it's like that is going to skew your perception of someone if you have. And I look back on it, I've been looking back on it over the last 24 hours, and it's like, it's just a job. And I'm, you know, it's always hard to lose something if you've been doing it for a while. I've been at that place for like a year that I was working more recently. And it's always hard because it's still a loss. And you get to know people, and there's a lot of people there that I really liked and I have a lot of respect for, and I enjoyed that. It was a good job, I guess is what I'm trying to say. It was a really good part-time job, but you know, I stepped on the wrong toes. I had a bad day. Shouldn't have even gone in. I should have just stayed home. That's all there is to it. That was kind of my recap on that. And I don't know, man. Like I said, I was looking back on it, and I was like, this lady kind of, and it is a lady. She just kind of didn't like me. I don't know what it was. Like after a time, at first she really did, and then I think it was like after I got hired, she just didn't like me as much, you know. This is weird. Maybe because I was like more invested, so I was like asserting my will more, and I don't know if that made her feel like threatened or something, but yeah, that's actually right. That's a really good way. If they like you, you're just sassy. Yep. And if they don't like you, you have an attitude problem. That's correct. Yeah. So like at first they liked me, and they all thought I was like, I had a good sense of humor and stuff because I was like sassy. But then we stop liking somebody, it's like, oh, you just think that person's a jerk. And so then like everything you do is painted in that light. And I had an exit interview basically, and I was talking to my boss, and I was like, I don't really get some of the stuff she's throwing at me, because it's like, that's not what I was doing. I'm the kind of person, it's funny too, like I worked on a boat a long time ago, and it was just all men, you know, all men. And when I worked in that environment, a male-driven environment, I'm not saying it's all good, so don't hear me right. You don't hear me being like patriarchy's awesome or something. Like, that's not what I'm saying. But when I worked in an environment with all men, there's very little like emotion outside of maybe some frustration and some anger. And the rest of the time, men are pretty flat, you know, like we're happy people. It's not like we don't have emotions. But like I worked with dudes that were really rough around the edges. I mean, they would say some horrible things sometimes, and they would get pissed. They would get really mad at people. You know, there was a lot of drama and stuff. And I never really participated in that, but like if you were mad and you're a dude and you're just working hard, I never really minded it. Like I was a supervisor on the boat, and as long as you didn't step on someone else's toes and like become an ass towards other people, excuse my French, but like I didn't really see the big deal. Like if you just want to work through it and you're working really hard and you're mad, cool. Like just don't make other people mad, you know, and just work through it. But anytime like I'd have like a not perfect day, anytime I'd have a not perfect day at this job that I was at, if I came in and I was like a little bit off, I got called out for it like super fast. Like this lady would be like, how are you doing? And I'd be like, hey, I'm all right. And she literally would say to me, are you ever okay? Are you ever just like good? And I'm like, I don't know. Yeah. Why is it so wrong for me to just tell you that truth, that I'm not happy or sad? I'm just in the middle. Like, but then everything I would do, she's like, they were accusing me of being like huffy and puffy. And I'm like, no, I just look angry when I work. That's just me. I don't know how to describe that. So I think in the end, I didn't like feeling like every single time I did something, my motivation was being questioned. That's not a good work environment. So like, it was always going to be either she like deals with who I am and just accepts that I'm not always happy and cheery, and I still do a really good job and I'm not hurting anybody, you know, or she doesn't. And then eventually I get fired. And that's what happened. So, because there's nothing I could do. I can't just pretend to be happy all the time. I just can't. It's not me. Some people can do that. I props to you, you know. And it's not that I'm genuinely an unhappy person. It's just not my temperament. I don't know what to tell you. So they saw that as me being like grumpy pants and angry, and like they were accusing me of like throwing stuff around, and I was like, what are you talking about? Like, that was the first I'd ever heard of that. I was so confused during my exit interview, and she could tell. And you know, by the time the interview was done, the lady was like, my boss was like, you know, I kind of feel bad now. And I was like, yeah, because you're firing me for no reason. It was like every time she brought something up, I was just like, oh, well, that's not what happened. This is what happened. And that's it. I just didn't understand it. And at the end of the day, what it came down to was I had a really bad day. My friend had died. He had committed suicide. I had to go to a funeral on Saturday. And it hit me really bad on Friday. And I wasn't in a good mood. I was upset. I was angry. And I shouldn't have gone to work. If I had not gone to work, I wouldn't have been fired, because that day was so different from every other day. But they were trying to make it sound like I had this like habit of being angry or something. And I'm like, no, that's pretty much the only time I've been angry. I don't know what you guys are seeing every other time. She was like, don't you think you've changed? And I was like, no, I haven't changed. people's perceptions of me have changed because they don't like me. Or one person in particular didn't like me, and she was the main reason. Because I mouthed off to her. It wasn't even like I didn't curse at her or anything, you know. And the great irony of it is that I just was like, I responded like in a curt way. Like I didn't respond super gently. I just sort of said something back to her. I was like, no, this is why I'm doing this. And then it just blew up. And that was it. And I knew myself. I knew in that moment, I was like, man, I should have just stayed home. I even told myself, I was like, maybe I should just leave. I was like, maybe I should just tell my boss what's going on and leave early. And it's funny how you do dumb stuff like that. And then like in your head, in my head, I was like, oh, if I leave early, it's going to cause problems. Nope. It's completely the opposite. And, it's a lesson in personal leadership, individual leadership, right? And I was talking about that yesterday. It's like, you have to be able to look at yourself and say yes or no, for those days. And I didn't do that. So I felt like, was she justified in firing me? Cumulatively, no. It made no sense. Because on the whole, the only reason she was firing me is because I was grieving of a lost friend and got mad at an employee. That's it. Like, that's the main reason what it boiled down to. Because everything else kind of fell by the wayside. But did I have a crap day? Sorry, I almost cursed. Did I have a crap day and like say something not nice to somebody in a not nice way? Kind of. I mean, it wasn't like the meanest thing you could do. And that's what I was saying about the working on the boat. It's like when I worked with all men, I heard so much crap. And I'm not saying it's good. I'm just saying like the tolerance level for that kind of like behavior was like infinitely higher. And you're not walking on eggshells, that was what someone said in the chat, but it really felt like that. I'm not trying to be sexist. And my boss, by the way, she's like a total badass. Like she's so good at what she does. I think that she understood when we left the interview that like this got blown way out of proportion, but she'd already made a decision. So I have nothing but respect for her as a boss. Like she's awesome. Like she's probably one of my favorite bosses I've ever had. But the lady that basically got me fired, I hate to say it, but she just I think she just pulled the puppet strings, and that's unfortunate. It's okay though. That's a life lesson. I was trying to acclimate to that environment, and I just kind of got like halfway there and then just couldn't go the rest of the way. And they just really wanted somebody that was Mr. Rogers, like all the time. And that's not me. So, and they saw everything that I did. They just kind of said it was like incredibly, you guys know, if you've listened to me for a while, you know that I've got like some kind of problem with like passion or defensiveness or something. When I'm like really invested in something, my voice elevates and I sit upright, and those are things that maybe I shouldn't do as much. Maybe I do need to be a little more passive, because when you're in like an all-female environment, that comes across as like really domineering. When a dude who's like really tall like me like stands up straight and speaks clearly and loudly and directly. My wife looked at me and she's like, that just sounds like you being assertive, and that's not an evil, I was like, yeah, I know. But when you work with like little old ladies, they don't like that. They don't like that at all. They think that you're trying to be like, I don't know, alpha male or something, which is not what I was doing. I just wanted to do my work and go home. I mean, I like the job. Yeah, Timmy, that's what I'm saying. I've been at my job for 30 years. I'm not happy every day. That's what I'm saying. Like, I didn't understand it. And here's the weird thing too, is like, I don't want to talk about this forever, but like, I told my boss that, and I was like, I asked her, I said, well, what are you talking about? You said I got mad and more than once. And she refers to this time, like when I was early on started, and I was like, yeah, but all I did was she made a decision that I didn't like because it was going to make it more work for me. I didn't know how to handle it right then. So what I decided to do, and I thought this was the right thing to do, you guys tell me, is this passive aggressive? Maybe. I thought it was just me taking control of my emotions because I looked at it and I was like, well, I don't know how to respond right now. So I think the best thing for me to do would be to kind of stick my nose down in my work, think about it, and then respond. So what I did, and this is such a simple thing, as I started breaking down boxes. If you guys don't know what that means, if you never worked in like a warehouse, it's where you like take apart the box and flatten it. Apparently, I was breaking down boxes violently or something. I have no idea because I in my mind, I'm just like, well, I'm frustrated, but I'm going to just work through it. And then I'm going to go talk to her about it. I got called into like her office, like the principal's office. And I was like, she's like, why are you angry? And I said, well, I'm not sure. I said, I got upset by something you said. I think it's going to cause more work and I'm confused because it doesn't make sense to me. And that's honestly what I said. I was very open about it. I said, but I didn't want to talk to you about it right away because I was feeling like I wasn't prepared to talk about it. Okay, so that's instance number one. What she told me then was she said to me, next time you have a problem, just come tell me. Tell me that you're upset and we'll talk about it. That was it. That's the only other time this has happened. And it was just me breaking down boxes. That's all that apparently was caused. Like that was the problem, which is strange to me. Because again, I've worked in all male environments or even male-female environments where there's more guys. No one would say anything to a dude who's breaking down boxes kind of rough. I would just leave him alone for a bit. Be like, all right, dude, do the hard work now. Come talk to you when you're ready. That doesn't bother me. I mean, and I've managed people like that are like that. I don't actually take offense to that. I think it's fine because I'd rather you do that than like lash out at somebody else. And if it's a big problem and it continues, yeah, it's a problem. But if it's like a one thing, I don't know. So that was really weird. Well, guess what happened? The next time, this is like 3 weeks, 4 weeks later, the next time I get quote unquote angry, it's another one of these kind of things that they did like while I wasn't there. And then I came back in and they're like, oh, we changed all this. And I was like, that's how I responded. I was like, I don't really like that. And I told her right then to her face, my manager, I said, yeah, it doesn't really make me happy. I'm kind of upset because I don't understand this. And she talked to me about it and we talked through it. And at the end I was like, yeah, I understand where you're coming from, but I still don't understand. And you might be saying like, well, dude, you're just insubordinate, Ben. You just don't know what you're doing. And I'd be like, well, look, I understand, you're insubordinate, man. Like, that's not really how I felt. Like, I was hired to like try to manage some stuff in this warehouse area. So I was confused by the micromanagement, if that makes sense. And I just didn't really know what she was doing with it. So I was confused and kind of upset by it because I was like, well, you asked me to do this job and now you're coming back in and you're changing things. You're not talking to me about it before you make the changes. And I understand that you're the manager, you're the owner, but I thought you hired me to do this, Well, guess what? During the exit interview, she brings that up and she says, you were angry that time too. I said, I'm sorry. Did you not tell me that I was to express to you when I didn't agree with something? So this is not insubordination. This is me doing what you told me to do. You wanted me to tell you when I was upset by something, and so I did. And I'm like, okay. So apparently that's a strike against me? That doesn't make any sense. And I told her that. I was like, I don't get it. And she said, oh, I see why that would have confused you. That's what she said. She's like, I can see why that would have confused you. I was like, yeah, because you told me to talk to you about it, and I did. So why is that being counted against me? And not only did I talk to you about it, I moved on. I just accepted it. By the next day, coming in, I was like, all right, this is what we're doing now. I'm on board. Let's keep going. Like, I don't know why stuff like that should ever be counted against you. And so it definitely boils down to like narrative you get stuck in this kind of weird spiral where like people start viewing you differently. And then I think this other woman told her that I had like changed or something. Like I wasn't cheery all the time. She would make weird comments about it, like all the time. She'd be like, "Oh, I really wish we could have so and so work with us. They're happy all the time. You know, they're always a joy." And she'd say that like right within earshot of me, really loud. I mean, it was so obvious that she was just trying to like hint, hint, nudge, nudge. Booksy, why don't you be happier? And I'm like, I don't get it, lady. I'm doing a killer job. Yeah, that's what my wife said. And I don't ever use that word, but I hate to say it, but that's actually what my wife said. She was like, she sounds like but you know, and I was like, ugh, yeah. What? She wasn't like that at first. That's the weird thing. It was just one day she just decided that something I said rubbed her the wrong way, and that was it. And she just started, it just started a torpedo of like, everybody's going to look at you in this way, and now anything you do is going to be perceived as some kind of passive aggressive. I'm like, it's not. I'm just working. And man, I can't tell you how many times I even said that out loud to people. I'm like, they're like, I'm sorry. And I'm like, you don't have to be sorry. I'm just working. Like, it's like my face was angry or something because I'm concentrating. And so in the end, I got fired, I think, because I was grieving my friend and because somebody had it out for me, I guess, to move me along the way. They didn't like working with me. And that's all there is to it. And, she said, I think she realized that what she was doing was silly because the manager by the end was like, well, maybe we'll just take a break and you can come back later. And I was like, whatever, whatever you want to do. I didn't say whatever, but I said, whatever your decision is fine. Because what are you supposed to do? I'm not going to like sit there and like be angry about it. That would be stupid. I was just like, all right, I get it. I get why you're upset that I was upset on Friday. I don't understand why I'm being fired, but that's your choice. So really strange, man. I did such a good job too. Like I'm really proud of the work that I did for them, and I would have stuck with them. Like I definitely would have, because the work that they do is a nonprofit group is really good. It's a nonprofit organization, and they do great work. And at the end of the day, like it's for a good cause. There's a lot of frustration about how they organize stuff. They didn't have a system, and it's because they've never owned that kind of business before. It was like a 2.5-year-old business. I mean, so it needed a better production line. It needed a better system. And that's kind of what I'm all about. I love that kind of stuff. I love operations and logistics and stuff. When you're looking at stuff like in the market, it comes across as just analysis and maybe a little bit of obsessive compulsiveness. But when I work in like an environment where you can make a difference and like you can have creative problem solving and do things like that. Like I love that kind of stuff. It's a lot of fun. So like I said, I really like the job. Like I would have stayed if she had just said, let's sit down and talk about it. I would have apologized too to the other lady. And I did. I even apologized after I got fired. I didn't have to do that. I'm not trying to virtue signal. I'm just saying like, that's just the way it needed to be. Like I wasn't nice to her, so I apologized. For a moment, I wasn't nice to her. Man, yeah, she just stared at me. She didn't even say anything. She didn't say, apology accepted. She just stared at me and said, okay, and like, she's like, well, I wish you the best or something. And she's just like, goodbye, I was like, you might as well have just said, watch your butt on the way out the door, That's the way it sounded. So, anyways, you got to do what you got to do. Hold your head up, move on. I'll tell you what, though, before I started doing this part-time gig, I was kind of in a bit of a rut. So we had done the stuff for stock market. I'm just flipping through charts right now. We had done a lot of this stuff for the stock market, and I've been kind of hung up on AMC for a while. And I was getting a little bit burned out by not the AMC community. That doesn't sound nice, but just by the whole thing, you know. There's so much involved in that meme stock movement, and it can be very difficult. And at that time, there was a lot of people over the course of like 2 years, there were a lot of people who had kind of dropped off. They'd sold the stock, moved on. There were other people who were like prominent YouTubers who had just kind of quit doing AMC. A lot of big people started saying, no, we're not going to talk about it anymore. And I just stayed with it because I wanted to continue to honor what I said I was going to do, which was to continually chart it for folks. I still own a position in AMC. I do. I still have a position. It's not the best average ever. You know, if we pop to like 30, I probably make it out with a profit, but I don't have that much money to like throw into it continuously. I think it's at a good place right now. You could make some back. But I was getting kind of burned out, and I wanted to see if doing something else part-time would help me to better focus my attention when I wanted to focus my attention on the stock stuff. And it kind of did, and it kind of didn't. We had a, these things happen kind of mentality. So I'm happy that I did what I did, and I think it gave me a break. And at the end of the day, I got to be honest, like I don't think I want to be in a, I'll check out the price action, Eric, just a second. I don't think I want to be in a streaming position like the rest of my life. It doesn't sound like a job for me. It sounds more like a hobby. And if I made it into a job, I don't know if I would like it, kind of thing. And so there's going to be a little bit of back and forth for me when it comes to like figuring out how I want to continue, but I do want to continue. And another part of it is like I tried doing full-time trading, and I don't know what it was, but something about trading and streaming at the same time just didn't really click for me. When I went about, this looks about right. When I went about trying to do both, I found that I just didn't do a great job trading. And when I just traded, I did fine. You know what I mean? But then I couldn't maintain any kind of stream. So I think what it's going to be is some kind of combination, maybe like a half day kind of thing here and there. Unless I find something else to do. I have other things that I do, but it's a kind of a as it comes basis. So those gigs don't always last forever. Yeah, so this is what we thought this morning. I thought this is what would happen. So this is what happened. So that's what I'm saying. Like, I was really preoccupied with streaming today. But I could have, if I wanted to, traded that bottom because I knew it would probably bounce and come back up towards the top again. And this is what I had drawn out. And I said if it broke down, this is where we'd end up. But I didn't trade it because I'm preoccupied, doing something else and trying to focus my attention on that. And it's just a little hard for me to do both. I'm not that good at it. So I have to really focus. Even if it's like a trade where you're just kind of gently trading through something and you don't even have to sit there and watch it. Like you can kind of make your order and let it go. I want to be in a position where I'm positively impacting the folks around me as much as I can. So if I'm going to do a good job streaming, I can't be actively trading at the same exact time, and then vice versa. So streaming doesn't really profit me almost at all. There's very little profit in that. It's just the nature of like I want to again do it. Like I like doing it, and I like being able to interact with other traders and see how the stocks are moving, and I see it as educational. Yeah, this would have been again on a 15-minute scale a decent entry. And look, I know I've been talking a little bit about the master fractal lately because we did it yesterday. I just want you to know this is the same nearly the same setup that we have on the macro right here, is that you had this massive gap down, this drop, right? And then you have sort of like a double layer bottom. So you got the M shape where there's layer 1, layer 2. It's a shallow S curve. And I've talked about this for a lot of the macro stuff because I'm not positive, but I'm thinking that this is going to be like a shallow S curve. So I pulled up that, and then I thought I might use it, but I don't really want to use that. So let's use the S curve. That sounds like a silly thing, but it's almost like your S curve like hit the water and then just sank slowly, and it doesn't actually go a full 50% beyond. Now, you might say, which is valid, you might say, Booksy, this is not like the macro because this is already in an uptrend and the macro is in a downtrend. But the shallow S-curve plays out the same way, which is you get that sequence at the end. And this is exactly what I'm looking for on the macro in a reactive move. So before you kind of like discredit it, just consider the similarities. And I'm going to take this to the big picture. I know what you're thinking is like, well, again, this is like a micro fractal. You can't use that to inform a macro. No, you can't. But you got to remember that the way in which a stock is traded, and I think you do remember, most of you, the way in which a stock is traded through its iterations is a pattern, and it's a pattern of behavior. It's a behavior pattern for the algorithms that are trading the stock. So if they like to trade a certain way, you got to pay attention. And the volume profile here is also really telling, that massive volume drop and then the diminishing volume as it goes down. So there's the three elements, right? So you have that's huge type. So you have a shallow S curve. Here, you have diminishing volume here until what? Until kind of like the very end. And then there's a volume spike here. And then look at the RSI in the last couple of bottoms here. And check out that turn up. You see that? So the picture that I'm trying to paint is that this concept of, let's call it like, I don't know what I should call it. I guess it's like the slingshot. This slingshot concept that I was trying to like tell you about earlier in the stream when I was having like really crappy problems, and looks like we're having some problems again, but that's all the same. Like the setups here are the same kind of setups. So if I look at something like that and I take this and I use it on a macro scale, right, assuming that you have kind of a similar view in mind of what could happen, we're going to go to the daily. All things with a grain of salt, I suppose, in this market, but the purpose of this is not to tell you it has to be a certain way. It's just to show you the similarity in the setup, and that it reinforces what we've been talking about a lot, which is, I mean, oddly, it looks really similar to what I drew here, which is kind of interesting. But, I mean, I guess it would, right? So if the levels make sense and they play out on different proportions, it doesn't really matter how you you draw it out, you know. At this point, you might say like, okay, all right, you got me, Booksy. It looks pretty similar. Everything looks kind of the same. I mean, it looks like the same pattern. Or really similar. And all that's required is a hold here, and it's going to like take off. And then notice that these levels, though they're not perfect, I wouldn't see this as 1-to-1 because this hasn't hit the gap yet, the tiny one. See how it's like come up, but it didn't quite get to that gap fill? I think it'd be like us coming up to like 33 or something. So you might need to squash this a little bit. It's hard to do this with the bars because they act weird. Some of y'all know what I'm talking about. If you ever mess with bars patterns in TradingView, they do weird stuff proportionally. This is the same concept though. I think I've made my point. This is why I was wondering, like, if we make that move, we might be in really good shape. I think the hard thing is like, where does that move happen? How do you measure it? Yada yada yada. I really think it's quite simple. It's this upper channel here, you know, and I don't have it drawn on the bars pattern, but you can see it. That's where the breakout happens. Right there. And I'm looking at that bars pattern as the probable example. So, yeah, it seems right. And notice this goes all the way back up to this pocket, which is like us going back up to 12. It's virtually identical. No, nothing is guaranteed in the market. I think that's a given. Yes, I still think there's a possibility that this, though this made a spring here, there's still a possibility, and it's a smaller one, but there's a possibility in my mind that it could still come down one more time. We really don't know until it happens because the spring action is exactly what it sounds like for price discovery. And it doesn't really matter if the RSI is already divergent. If the price discovery needs to happen, you could see that drop. I'm not sure. I don't know if that was enough. You know, there's a big, giant sell-off here, but then the buy-in's kind of so-so. I don't know. Hard to say. I think locally, though, this is the point I was trying to make, is that it's essentially like the same kind of move. The difference being that we're not going up on as much strength, perhaps, as we would like. Not yet. But yeah, I mean, it's super similar. We could do some more stuff with this just for fun. Maybe what would be good would be to put it like over here and sort of map it to the same levels. That might be good. Do that instead. And that way we can see it more of like a side-by-side. So this is the area we're talking about jumping. Yeah. Back, baby. Let's see if my estimations were we're close enough. We're just doing a proportional examination of, this is the move that we are experiencing right now on the micro. So if you're wondering where that came from, this is way out there. Let's get rid of that. If you're wondering where this came from, this bars pattern, this is the current micro move. And it was a big gap with a slide down and then an M shape into a bottom. And it's very similar to what we were examining yesterday and some today with that fall through. That's smart, Eric. Yeah, because I think it's debatable if it needs to drop again. Even if it didn't make a new low, it could be like a head fake moment. And like I said, even if it did make a new low, you could still see that RSI divergence. So it's kind of like, meh, you know. I'd like to see it kind of do this and break out. But yeah, so this is what we're seeing right now on the micro. And I'm going to move this stuff over so it's easier to see. Get rid of some of this little gobbledygook here. So what I want to do is, okay, cancel. Let's get rid of some of this stuff real quick. Sure. All right, that's good enough. And then let's take a look at these levels. So when this comes up, we're just eyeballing it. But when this comes up, it hits it really comes to this like hook level. You see that? I don't see the wicks here, but I'm pretty sure there's probably a wick right there. We're chopping right underneath and along this previous range here. So this ends up being kind of the resistance. And then support on this level is down here. It's at the first caddy or the second caddy here. So that would imply that this is fairly correct. It almost makes it seem like I've got it too chill. Like this should be rocketing faster to the upside and then maybe sitting on top of this range here. Just kind of skipping that middle. Yeah, do you see what I'm saying? Like I've got it not, it's the same idea because this is a big M cross. I know it doesn't seem like, maybe it doesn't look like it right away, but you can see the 1-2 push. So there's a 1, 2, and then there's like a deep middle with a massive exit spike. And then there's the second one where you build a higher low. So it is in essence just a fancy pants creek cross here, jumping over a creek. That's probably easier to define if we were zoomed in. I'm not zoomed in, so I can't see it, but I'm not sure where that would be. Maybe maybe for us it is low though, and that's what I was trying to say. Like I don't know if it would ever need to be 1-to-1. It could be like this. So this would be like where the creek cross is. Does that make sense? And I would totally accept that and think that's probably what would happen. Yeah, I think we're probably right. I'm not going to change it. And then the next move goes all the way up past, I mean, this move is really very far because it's going for that gap. This is kind of like your January, June stuff where you get that middle of the S curve. So, you know, I don't anticipate it would go extremely high, maybe again up to 14, and then we'll see if it has any continuation. The local one hasn't filled the gap yet, I don't think. I'm not really looking at it super close, but there's still the gap. It hasn't quite gotten there yet. So this is the micro. One thing that we might say is a little different is timing, because it just looks different. Timing doesn't look the same. we can go from maybe this hook to the bottom. That's 42 degrees. Mm, 42 degrees. So the angle of entry is very similar to the exit angle. So in that case, the timing probably wouldn't look the same. Yeah, it's pretty darn similar. 34. So it makes it sort of more realistic, I guess, when you do that. So you're not just going straight up. It takes time, right? Could take a lot of time. So where is election time? Maybe I've got this off because it's too close. I know that's the 6th, but I'm going to leave it there. Okay. Well, obviously, you know, there's a couple different angles. I always try to pay attention to what I'm looking at. Like, so for the example, this angle worked really well. I sort of had a hunch that usually the beginning and the end. So the beginning is where the hook is. It's like where the last kind of major supply point, resistance point, and then we started dropping down, and then that's the last place we checked. And then actually this might even be here, and then the bottom. But there's also a couple other angles that you can use. So one would be like the steepest angle. That one's not always the best. I don't know. I find that one's a little misleading because it can often be like your exit angle, but it's very rarely like the long-term one. I think in January, that might be like the exception because it continued later on, but it was, yeah, it's trajectories are just kind of estimations anyways. So I'm going to use this one, which is to this peak. This is 51 degrees. I'm not seeing any kind of major difference here. It doesn't look like it peaks to that point. So that's not really helpful. Let's try it in reverse. Let's try using this one because this is clearly like the direction this is moving. And that's 66 degrees. So this is actually really close to in line with the angle here right before the drop, before the hook. And interesting enough, because I think that this angle probably matches. Yeah. You see that? Oh, maybe an easy way to kind of help triangulate. So that's going from here down. 69 degrees. Okay, well, it just so happens it's like the same as the angle I drew. I don't know. That might be a little bit presumptuous. Though, I guess what this would tell me is that this would be your kind of bigger, I don't know. It doesn't really make any sense because this is the S-curve. The S-curve comes to here, which is like the center mark. It's higher. Well, I guess there's not much else to it. It does seem like this is roughly the right place. So it's right around $5 in May if the move happens. That's May 24th. And you'd probably have a pretty big pullback with some time attached to it, and then there's really no telling. I guess you'd be waiting for it to kind of reach the trend. The curious part of this is that I didn't measure the trend as you would a trend. I measured it just according to the reverse. So I guess, I don't know. Do we wait and see what happens at earnings? Maybe it does drop to this trend and then pushes up. Or do we go ahead and draw the trend steeper since it doesn't reach it? I'm not sure. Like the first one I think is a pretty safe bet. It looks like around May 22nd, you'd be up at like 5. Which is very soon. The second one is a lot trickier because you're really looking at where does it reach kind of the edge, and I don't know. I am not sure. It just depends on this early entry angle. If we go back to the reverse split opening, instead, that actually looks stronger to me, doesn't it? You see that? It's whipping around it. I think that might be a stronger trend. Let's try that, 46. Still not quite there, but it's closer. So the rest of this is kind of fluff because I don't think after the first reaction there's much else to say. You know, this finds support sort of above that previous hook, and it was already rising. So, I mean, it really could be anywhere. I think it's hard to determine where that is. It honestly looks like it's finding support way up here, like around, it would be for us proportionally around like $6. It kind of implies that you'd have a big move up, and there would be checks here, but that's just like the middle. So after this creek check, that's where you come back down, and then you make a big move up, and then you drop down to like 6, and then there's like a final move, and that's where the structure actually sets up for the top. That works. I think that works pretty well, actually. This would be really similar to the January run because I think we had an earnings right here. I'm not saying, again, it can't come back down. Obviously, we've been talking about that all day, but I actually find that to be fairly reasonable. It's not like way out of proportion possible. Just based on the setup, it seems likely. You'd have to go through the motions, you know, and get there, but every one of those steps has to check a box. So there's a lot that has to be proven, I guess, with that move, but kind of one that makes me invest more in AMC, because I think that mid to late June is probably a safer bet. Maybe even way beyond that. Just next year leaps or something. Yeah, so there's a lot going on right here. It's a weird chart, I know. I am biased towards the bullish side. So like another thing here is, what if you believe because the distance between these is basically the same as the distance to, like, there's a equal distance from the next earnings to the January election. Why couldn't that be like your depression point at the next earnings? It could be. And I think that's one of the tricky things, is that I've got this drawn according to itself. Like, I think this is a very elevated angle, which tells me this should go up fairly steep. But the rest of it, I am kind of like eyeballing it based on other things. Based on the fact this thing went super fast in to this bottom, I think it would go super fast out. Unlike this bottom, which I don't know. It's not there yet, but you catching what I'm throwing out there? Because just to be fair, one could look at this chart and argue, well, Booksy, you've got that way more elevated. It's faster, and I think that's fair. And if you wanted it to be more accurate, maybe it hits up here around 5 and consolidates for a long time, and then jumps into earnings. And that could be where you get kind of a secondary push. So this is possible that I've got this kind of exaggerated motion, and really maybe we do see it go up, but it doesn't happen until way later. So, yeah. Yeah, I think it's probably wise to just err on the side of caution and suggest that somehow there's a longer accumulation that happens in the middle. And then perhaps this price action, which is the one that most of us would want to sort of see happen, that doesn't really happen till later. I don't know. Maybe run up into earnings, Kind of makes sense. That's the summer blockbuster time. It gives a reasonable excuse for why we might be running beyond just fundamental stuff. Movies get announced. It's just an idea anyways. I mean, this satisfies everything that I'd look for in that move. We're going to run into some disagreement about these kinds of things, like the angles here that I've got. I don't know. I'm drawing them intuitively, but there probably are ways to kind of look at that a little bit more objectively. Yeah, this would make sense to be at the peak, potentially around here, like right back to where we started with the reverse split by the election. And then you could make a decision at that point, because it's right at that creek too. You see that? That's the main creek down. So we would hit that like perfect time for election. It's just a slow climb. Somebody was asking about something else, and yeah, I'm kind of reading through your comments now. I don't think that everybody should be a negative Nancy. I just think that you have to be mindful of people's temperaments, which that's exactly what you said after. You said you have to know what your skills and attitudes are because that's how you're going to manage. That's what management is, you know? And I think she just didn't know how to manage me, my boss. Yeah. No, I just work with like, yeah, I don't know. I worked, I worked with mostly old ladies, so it's kind of weird. But just one of them just had like a chip on her shoulder. All right, I'm not seeing anything. Oh, Duke said, can you tell me about the stock CGC? Sure. Let's take a look. I'm just going to do it over here. Like Computer Graphics Corporation. Canopy Growth Corporation. I got one of their words right. Canopy Growth. Is that real estate? What do they do? If you're still here. That's good. There's a bullish pattern here. This is a little odd because it's advancing above the recent climax pretty quickly. I am inclined to say it looks okay unless it breaks the current creek. Because I know that a lot of folks would look at this and say it's a I think it could be a spring bottom here with that volume. And I know I talk about divergence all the time, but like there's a really huge one on the daily from this bottom over here to this one. You see how the price was coming down. And then this looks like an automatic reaction here, followed by a phase B top. And then all I see is what appears to me to be like a spring. The challenge of this kind of stuff is always to identify whether this is an upthrust, which is distributive, and I know it kind of feels that way, versus just a phase B top. I'm zooming out and zooming out and zooming out because I really got to get a feel for the big picture here. Yeah, I mean, it looks like a spring. Yeah, and this is one of those things. It's like it hasn't come back up in a long time to check any averages, and hasn't been up to the top of its range in a long time. It's probably heading towards 25, which is near the bottom here, previous bottom. And it also would make sense because there's a EMA crossing there that it would come back just to check it. It looks a lot like what happened here. You get these downward thrusts and it's descending, but then the RSI is clearly going up. I mean, this is just painful, obvious right there. And you have something very similar here. It took a minute though, you know, but the difference I guess in the two is the distance traveled might be a little farther this time. And quite frankly, I don't know if it is distribution. I don't think it may not be, because there's a peak here and it doesn't go above it. Tricky stuff. Yeah, there it is. So yeah, what happened with this stock? Did it have some kind of news or something? Like, this rarely comes without some kind of catalyst. This kind of a move is pretty massive. Yeah, it's jumped the creek. For sure. This is kind of why I like that other stock I was talking about. It has a very similar vibe to it. It's got this like long-term widening spread. It's got a divergence on the bottom with a massive increase in volume. It's at historic lows. I don't know, man. We might get like a market squeeze for some of these smaller cap stocks. For earnings, I would be careful. I'm the same way because the last few earnings have been good earnings reports, but we've mostly gotten downside. And, you know, typically when we go up into earnings, it's not great. I was saying earlier that last week or that next week will be easier to tell, because if we're sitting underneath this trend, in my opinion, it's worth just waiting it out. If we've already broken above and like we're pulling back or something, it'll be easier for me to say yay or nay. That breakout hasn't happened, so there's no confirmation yet, you know. I like the price low. Don't get me wrong. I'd rather buy at 330 than like 4 or even 380, but there's still a chance we get like this head fake down. And I have a feeling if we did that and we did a head fake, it probably hit like 260 and then reverse hard. And I'm not talking about the longer downside. I'm just saying a head fake, which is like a dip down because of earnings that then reverses really hard. And it would look like a bounce here. So I don't have that drawn on here at all. But a head fake is where it dips beneath or below. So it'd be like a spring, basically. So it hits here and then just kind of rockets up. I don't know. Part of me thinks that's probably the way it happens. But if you're just getting a share position, you know, averaging in is always easy. If you're trying to do something more options related and trying to time it, that's where things get really tricky. Earnings have been pretty detrimental to the stock price lately. Like, we've gotten a lot of drops right after. I want to be optimistic and say that it might give us that drop, but then we get an immediate return. So it just drops down to spring to like 260 and then just like rockets. It just depends on this this hook too. So just play tight stops, you know. You're gonna have to watch it carefully. Yeah, I don't know. You know, I wouldn't mind. I've worked with women like in different capacities, and all women environments, over the years, and there's pros and cons. Guys are not perfect either. We've got our own problems. And it just really depends on who's in charge and how they choose to manage. I just felt like I really wasn't managed much, but then the decisions were like to micromanage after the fact. So I don't know. Part of me is kind of happy I'm not there because looking back, I can kind of see it a little more clearly, but it is what it is. Looks like we might get a green day all around, which is nice. It's been pretty positive for the most part. Yeah, I think this looks good. I mean, AMC's, I really do think it's in a good spot. I know that you always have to take it with a... So many times we've said that, and then it just craps out after earnings, and I don't know why it's been so bad other than the dilution. But this structure to me is very convincing as it's finishing. So I'm of the opinion, I'll just put my foot down on it. I'm of the opinion that I think we're going to make the moves. I think we're going to start advancing. I don't have as strong of an opinion about the price targets, although I think they're there. Those are the targets that I got. Mainly because I'm not really convinced about the second earnings being a catalyst. I don't know. The one that would lead us to the election time. So, be that as it may, am I going to invest more in AMC going into earnings? Maybe. I'm thinking about it. At least share-wise, I think it might be a decent investment. Options are a little different, You got to be really careful with that. Implied volatility has been pretty low. Like they've kept it down pretty far. So the volatility, in my opinion, is set and primed to possibly run. And that's a positive. It doesn't mean it has to run just because of upside. It can also run because of downside. So you got to remember that. And you also have to remember that earnings is often a way to crush volatility, that sometimes there's a huge crush right before the move. That's happened quite a few times as well. Look, Canopy Growth Corporation, this is a breakout. It's finding volume. It's finding footing. It's getting, and we're on the weekly here, but it's already getting to a place where it's starting to look more overbought. So I think, at least for now, I would say 18. That's the current top. That might end up being a little bit of a Canopy. It might be a place where we sort of settle. So if it gets overextended here, you could see that this ends up needing like a backup to a creek, and that could take a while. That could be like, again, like that later part of the year type move. So yeah, I'm all for it. I think it looks like a good, simple breakout. I'm just not sure about the resulting action. I mean, it's just hard to say. Sorry. I feel that probably once this gets overbought, you're going to see a pullback to find footing. Another one. And maybe it doesn't have to be as long as I've drawn it, but man, oh man, is that not a spring-like action? I don't know how you could argue that it's not. or at least a squeeze. So my conservative price target for AMC is that the most conservative target is the $11 mark. I've got pretty strong conviction we'll get back there sometime between now and the end of the year. I don't have as strong of a conviction about 14, but that's one that's come up quite a bit, and that's kind of the next one. And honestly, beyond that, I don't really have any other targets until like 33 to 40 something, like way up here, because that would be like a second leg, in my opinion. I don't think that'd be part of like one move. I think there'd be two moves. So the first move, I think conservatively, would be 11 to 14. The second move, I would say, again, somewhere between, conservatively, between like 33 and 42. And then anything else beyond that is long-term kind of prediction. Like I've got some targets that go up to near 86, I think, but it's none of those seem short-term. Like they all seem really long-term, like a couple years down the road. At least 2025, maybe 2026, 2027. I mean, it's that far out. So, yeah. You know, AMC is a tough one. It's not the only play in the market right now, and there's others that look like they're in the same spot. We've got few right now. I mean, all the ones that are on the chart, AMC, ChargePoint, MPW, CGC, all of those have some massive divergent bottom, like over the last weeks. It's very interesting. It looks like the market just needs a little bit of a push, and then we're going to see probably a market-wide. I think we're going to see a market-wide squeeze for these smaller cap stocks. So that's what it looks like to me. It's really hard for me to see going the other way. Like I just can't, unless it's like a head fake. It's really hard. I don't know. Like a market-wide squeeze to me seems to be about imminent. And I'm getting a lot of positions kind of set up. It's important to note there's a difference between like a singular movement and then an overall trend, because some of these stocks are probably going to squeeze really hard and they're going to go really far, and then they're going to dump and they're going to come back down and they're going to establish a more modest trend. Like they're not all going to do the same thing. So as you trade these, just remember like your goals, you have target regions. If it turns out that the target region you picked is a little longer term, okay, then you're going to be holding, and you might need to be really patient. But as soon as that target's hit, I'm not going to give you financial advice in that way, but I personally just have to make sure that I'm taking the profit, because if it's something like a market squeeze event, you could be and I'm not saying everything's like January, but most squeeze events have a really massive buy up and then a really massive sell off. And you're actually better off selling and then buying back in a lot of those cases. If the volatility stays high enough for long enough, you can maintain profit on like long-term leaps. And I think that in the case of AMC, that was the case. Like it never came way back down, volatility, implied volatility. It was always like really high after the January squeeze. They did crush it some, but it never like fully reset. And so you would have had, if you had long-term leaps, you would have had a fairly good chance of making really good profit, even if you held through the 3 months of sideways action. my concern is that not every stock is like that. And so you have some moves that just get, this could pop and just run really hard, for example, to 7. Well, if you don't see that breakout, then why can't it come back down to like 5 and then do it again? It's like, so you're running the risk of just letting it go. And a lot of times what I like to do is the math, I'll do it beforehand, and I'll think about how do I just play with what we call house money, right? Where let's say I invest like 10 grand and then my position swells. I mean, this is a huge exaggeration, but let's say I invest 10 grand and it goes to 30 grand. One thing you might do is say like, okay, take everything off the table that's profit and then just let the last 10 grand ride, where you're just playing with profit, right? Because you've already doubled your income or doubled your profit or doubled your position, excuse me, and you let the rest ride. But playing with house money is also like you take away the original investment. So that would be like, let's say if it went 10 to 15, and let's say I invested $10,000 and it swelled to $15,000, and I'm not really sure if it's going to keep running or not. Yes, you're reducing your position. Yes, you're not going to make as much profit if it continues to run. But as a safety precaution, you can take your original investment back so that you basically guarantee that you're just scratching. So no matter what happens, you might just take the original position back. Now you're just playing with house money. So you basically have a free investment. And if it goes to 0, whatever, you've missed out on 5 grand, but hopefully that doesn't happen. But then you're just worried about, all right, well, how much do I want to save? Am I willing to let this drop 30% in value? It's just the profit. And that's kind of a nice way to trade when you get to that kind of benefit. And that I've not been able to do that like repeatedly because usually I'm so short term. But on longer term positions, I've done that. Like I've taken off the table what I originally invested, and that guarantees that I'm making a scratch on the play. I'll never lose money on it because I'm only playing with profit, if that makes sense. As long as I don't let that profit go past 0, right? That's sorry, I missed that part. If it starts dropping negative, then you have a problem, but simple. Yeah, and I'm definitely in the camp of like, let's not try to put all our eggs in one basket here. Most stocks have like winners and losers. You're gonna have stocks that run really hard and do really well, and some of them may kind of peter out. I'm not gonna be overly bullish about something like ChargePoint. Yeah, I'm a bull about it, but I also think that we might see like a big move up to like 3, and then it just sits there for months. And I'm not convinced that that's necessarily the best play for me. If I see it move to 3 and the volatility hikes, I'm probably just going to get out at 3 and then wait for a re-entry. Because I don't personally think this trade is going to be much more lucrative. It's different from something like AMC, which might end up having some pretty massive swings, because usually it has a stopping point in the middle, and then it has another massive swing afterwards. Usually it's got that S-curve that builds out, so a little different. You know what I mean? I just think you have to treat them all differently. So if AA did announce debt refinance, wouldn't we drop so covering could happen? Yeah, sometimes. So we've seen that a lot in the broader market. It's hard to say with AMC how many times we've seen that, but usually, yeah, you end up with a reverse move right before because somebody's trying to quickly change their position. Does that always happen? No. But in order for that to not happen, whoever's trying to like push that market move the direction they want is in charge. Like they're the alpha, they're emu, as they used to say. They're the emu. So They'd have to be the big money to do that. If they're not big enough, they don't always have the ability to drive the price. So that's where you get the shorts that are caught unaware and they end up helping drive a squeeze because they can't cover quickly enough. It happens a lot in the S&P. You get like a sell-off really fast, and then somebody uses that to get out of their puts and cover short positions, and then that's it. And then the market rallies. It happened like multiple times after FOMC meetings over the last couple of years. So a debt refinance would definitely be a big positive for AMC. I don't know if it's the only thing we need to hear, but it's a big positive. So I think they know that because they had been talking about the debt meeting, and if they've raised enough cash, if they've raised like $1 billion, and then they say, yeah, we've got $1 billion in cash and we've refinanced our debt, and it, we're not going to have anything due until 2029 or something crazy like that. Okay. That's pretty good news, I'd rather have them say, we're not only do we pay off this debt, but here's the plan for exactly how we're getting out of debt and it's going to work. But I mean, there's so many things that just take time. They're not going to announce everything all at once. So, all right, well, it looks like today is kind of a mixed bag. We've got mostly upside, but it's kind of like light. Like we had a bigger move in the morning, and then everything sort of chilled out and consolidated a bit mid to late day. We've only got a couple more hours in the market. I wouldn't imagine AMC is going to make major moves end of day. It's a little weird that we're sitting at like 320 most of the day. And usually for your max pain days, it's 3 or 350. It's not unheard of that we close at a different price. It's just typically that's what we see. So if there is a big move, I would expect it to come like right after like 2 o'clock or something. I think that's when all the options like have to be executed in the day. I don't know. They have different brokers have different policies, but I want to say it's like 2. You might see the moves happen right after that into like the final position for the day. I'm bullish on a lot of stocks right now. This CGC is kind of interesting. I'll keep it on my watch list. I don't know much about the company, but I like this bottom. I like it a lot. I kind of feel like we missed the boat though. Like you really wanted to be in bottom here. I still think there's a potential that this has a pretty massive move. My bigger concern is that it would take a long time, and this could end up taking till November before it crosses, and I don't know. So it's kind of like you chasing it. I'm not sure. It's cheap enough. If you did shares, you might be in at a good price where we don't come back too low, below 10. It's just debatable. Yeah. MPW gave up most of the run today. I think at highest it was like 6% up, 5 or 6% up. It's not bad though. I mean, it still looks like it's trying to finish this bottom. It's a little bit of an inverted head and shoulder, and that tells me there could be a dump into earnings before a big rally. If it is a head and shoulder, we might need to come back down and check $4. However, not everything's an inverted head and shoulder. Not everything's a head and shoulder. And this particular setup already came back and checked 396 like twice. So it might be enough. I've got a short-term put position because of the earnings that's coming up. And then I've got long-term leaps for this one. I just like it. And I've been looking at REITs a lot. I picked out a couple that I liked, and I talked about them yesterday. I didn't look at NU today, but I actually invested again in NU recently. I bought shares again. This is one of those stocks that's so fundamentally powerful. Like it has had such good profit that it's hard to make a strong argument that it's going to stop rallying. Like the market will eventually top it off, and when that happens, it'll come back down. But I liked NU back here at like $4, and I was kind of like skeptical of a huge move past like 7 or 8. I remember selling at like 7. So that, in retrospect, I got out way too soon. You know what I mean? And I could have made Bucos money if I had gotten like leaps, but I didn't time it right. That being said, this stock has almost exclusively, I think there's like one bad earnings, but it's almost exclusively had fundamentally strong earnings reports with really high profit margin. And it's one that I think, what's his face picked out too, oddly. And I didn't know that until after. Warren Buffett, he liked it. It was on his list. It's very strange. So this is a good one, I think, that potentially could have a longer term rally to it. This is an old thing. It was funny. I was right about that, but I ended up still getting out of the trade too soon. Yeah. So I'm pro NU. I actually think that even though it's reached back to its all-time highs, like I'm seeing it's overbought. I don't know, man. If I ride it up and it starts coming, if it gets above like 12 again, I'll probably set a stop loss. We'll see, but I feel like it's in a position where we could still get another leg. I do. I think we can get one more leg up. Because at this point, it's just up to bulls if they want to try to push to a new high. We haven't gotten there. Yeah, it's a little risky. I know we're at a potential top, but that's my thought about it. ChargePoint, still like this stock. I like most of the EV ones, but this one I just kind of been around for a while on my list, and there's others. They're pretty good. I said I was going to mention them, but I don't have the list on me. So I'll try to do that next time. But there's a few that are pretty good. The other REIT that I had was Cube. Cube is not one that has broken out yet. I didn't even check it today. Cube Smart. It's a real estate investment trust, and it looks a little distributive right here. It's hard to say. Like it kind of broke this local trend. It's struggling to keep its EMA. It's an undervalued stock. That's why I looked at it. Even at $40, it's trading beneath its expected value. I think, if I remember right, long term it hasn't broken out, though. It's a little ways off. So we've got a little bit of proving to do. I'd be interested if it made another low here that was higher, and that the RSI was higher. I think you could see a pretty strong reversal back up to the 50s. Yeah. And that's a big deal. I mean, that's a big